Welcome back to Beyond the Headline, everyone. I'm so excited you're here today because I'm here with the founder of Nucleus, Jonathan Frankel. Thank you for being here, Jonathan.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
We have to start out with the founding story of Nucleus because it certainly wasn't on the trajectory plan.
Yes, you could say that. My background never had anything to do with Intercom. So I have a computer science degree. I then went to a Rabbinic Ordination program, which I did 2 years at the time, didn't finish then. From there, I went to Harvard Law School and had every intention of becoming a lawyer until the end of the first week or so, when you figure out it's actually be a lawyer. And as glamorous as editing footnotes till 2 a.m. sounds, I decided maybe it wasn't the best career path for me. Absolutely love law school. The study is fascinating. So I finished. I have a JD from law school. I went from there to the Boston Consulting Group, where I did everything from project demand for nuclear fuel for the next 10 years to helping a large dollar store chain negotiate with their toilet paper suppliers. So like soup to nuts. And then when I started with BCG, we moved to suburban Philadelphia. And I have a wife, I have 3 little boys, and we were renovating our house and wanted to put in an intercom system. And I went to go get a quote, and the quote came back for $5,000 for literally the same one my parents had put in 20, 30 years ago. And I thought it was crazy that here we are. It was 2013 at the time, and still trying to sell old analog beige boxes. So I thought we can do better. We've all seen iPads. We know what modern technology can do, and we can do better. So I found Isaac Levy and Morley Ivers, 2 co-founders, and together we co-founded Nucleus. And what Nucleus is it's a way to better help you communicate with your family. So as a camera, speakers, microphone, touchscreen, you put on your wall, connect it to Wi-Fi. Anyone can install in 5 minutes. And you can talk within the home, from kitchen to bedroom, from kitchen to basement, but also because it's internet connected between homes. So from my kitchen to my parents' kitchen, my grandmother's kitchen, all instantly and effortlessly.
That's wonderful.
So been doing this for a little. Oh, sorry. Yeah, been doing it and been enjoying it a lot.
That's when you mentioned being able to connect to your parents' home. That's what got me so excited about Nucleus, and I sensed the same excitement in a blog post that your team member Nate had about this really resonating with him because he has a grandmother who's legally blind and he wants to be able to see her and check up on her. I feel like Nucleus really resonates with people. How has that been for you as a founder?
It's been wonderful. When you get emails from that, and even if the person says, I'm not going to pre-order now because I want to wait till it's on the market, but I can't wait to get it because X, Y, and Z. And we hear all these stories of people who have either elderly relatives or people who are infirm within their home, or they had to move away from their hometown and they've been really missing their family, and they just can't wait for this because while Skype and FaceTime are great technologies, we're talking over Skype, it is an amazing technology. There's still a lot of friction there. And when I want to talk to my parents in New York and have my kids talk to them, it takes a good 5 minutes. I call them, they call me, we have to set up our laptops, and it's a friction-filled process. As opposed to this, it's one tap and you can instantly connect anywhere in the world.
And that's what we were just discussing, how amazing it is in the video that you guys have of a baby just about to take his first steps, and they're able to call in grandma right away. Can you tell us about how Nucleus works in that sense of how quick it is to get in touch?
Sure. So Nucleus uses a technology called WebRTC. Isaac Levy, the co-founder, our CTO, is one of the leading experts in WebRTC. Technology he's built is directly integrated into Google Hangouts. And so the way it works is we keep a signal up and running, such that as soon as you touch, you're able to connect anywhere in the world instantly. I was in Taipei, meeting with Foxconn manufacturer, and we were able to talk to people in New York, Israel, and Mexico. Within each under a second, you touch and you see them. You touch and you see them. It's instant.
Do you see that reaction from people? Just that shock when they first use it?
Well, I can say Foxconn's an investor in our company, so I think they were pleasantly surprised at that speed.
I think that's incredible. And for you, Jonathan, we're just saying, this wasn't exactly the plan. What's your journey been like as a founder? What have you learned?
Everything. You go in, it's almost good that you don't know what you're getting yourself into, because if I knew then what I know now, I probably would have just gone with the footnotes and become a lawyer, because it's definitely an interesting journey. I think the most important thing is just to surround yourself with good people, and make sure that you have the right people, you know, taking charge of the right critical development points. So having Isaac on technology, having Morley on partnership and business development, and they are so good at what they do, that that was probably the inflection point. Like finding them and bringing them on board is just so critical. And having people with domain expertise really just helps smooth the path tremendously.
How did you find them in the early days?
So this is where, like, this is where the rabbinic ordination comes in. Like, I thank God, for the fact that what may have been coincidence, but people, you make your own luck, so to speak. So Isaac, I found after I've been searching everywhere for people that had a very specific skill set, and I couldn't find anyone with that very specific skill set. I tried outsourcing it, I tried nearshoring, I tried offshoring, I tried, even though I hadn't programmed in 10 years, I tried doing it myself at one point, just because it just was not getting done. And then finally one day I was looking again for this very specific match of someone who WebRTC, Android, hardware, electrical engineering, someone that knows all of this. And Isaac's name popped up, and I reached out to him, and it happened to be like the perfect moment for him. He was ready to move on from the company he was at. He loved the idea. As mentioned, he has 4 kids. Like, he just absolutely loved the idea, and he joined. Morley was actually a little bit more interesting. He and my father were the last 2 standby seats on a flight.
What?
Yeah, they were sitting all the way in the back of a Toronto to New York flight. Literally the 2 seats next to the bathroom. They both fly that route a lot, and Morley has family in Toronto. My father's from Toronto originally, and they got to talking. They're both Canadian and friendly, and they got to chatting. And Morley also, he got taken with the idea. He initially joined as an advisor, and I was so impressed with the value add he did in just those brief phone calls that after a few months I asked him to join full time, and he did. So this is where, like, you have to seize the opportunity, carpe diem. You seize the opportunities when they arise, and the fact that we were able to meet Morley that way was perfect.
It's crazy. And so when it was just the 3 of you, what were the early days like building the product?
A real roller coaster. I mean, we had quasi acquisition offers very early, like letters of intent that we received that were pretty early, because people saw the power of this. And you have to take a deep breath and say, we think we can do better, right? We think we can build this into a big company. But then the next day, nothing's working, and you do a demo, and it all falls apart, and you go to VC and they rip you to shreds. You're like, what, maybe that letter of intent wasn't so bad after all. But just keeping in mind that we knew that this was a product that spoke to people. As we spoke to people that had families, we kept hearing great feedback, and just keeping in mind both as qualitative feedback we kept getting, but also the quantitative, the fact that there are a lot of homes out there that have looked for intercom systems and have opted not to buy, because who's paying $5,000 for an old analog system these days? So both the qualitative feedback and the quantitative feedback, we knew we were onto something big. So just keeping that almost like North Star in our minds was very helpful.
I know it's important for you to be in Philly. You've said before that a lot of the best feedback you get is actually when you take your kids to school and talk to parents.
For sure. I mean, I'm so happy to be outside the tech bubble in San Francisco and Silicon Valley. And I say that with endearment. I go to San Francisco maybe once a month. I mean, I have 2 trips back to back planned in the next few weeks. I go there frequently, and I love going there. It's a great place, but it's not indicative of the rest of the U.S. And getting outside that bubble and talking to people who, as you mentioned, have never heard of Nest before. They've never heard of what the smart home is, and you have to sell them on something that solves their problems, not what some engineer in San Francisco conceives of a normal Joe's problems. So the ability to be outside that bubble and be able to relate and understand what is afflicting families, who have never heard of some of these other smart home devices, and solve real problems is great.
What were some of the first questions you asked people when you were bringing up Nucleus?
So the question people always ask me is, how is this different than Skype? And it's a
So
great.
different.
So thank you. I'm going to bring you along with me whenever I get those questions. Um, it's different for a few reasons. I mean, one of which is, inside the home, Skype is not even a relevant piece of the conversation, right? I already have a Nucleus beta unit set up at my house, and I'm able to, my wife calls me from the kitchen, I call from my office, and able to just instantly talk. I can check on the kids, and it's incredible. And like Skype doesn't even enter that conversation. But in addition to that, intra-home use cases, as we call it, having this instant frictionless communication between homes, as we've discussed in the past, is also we like to use the uh, metaphor that just like taxis and Uber or Lyft seem to do the same thing, right? They're four wheels, take you from point A to point B, but very, very different experiences, right? One's full of friction and leaves you angry. The other one is just frictionless and like almost a magical experience. So to hear, like, you could speak to your parents on Skype, but you almost never do because it's so full of friction and it's such a often negative experience. Whereas with us, it's one touch and you're there.
How were your initial tests of the really early stages of the product?
Initial tests, you said?
Initial tests, yes.
So I mean, Isaac had a beta version up within a week of joining, but then the the probably the difference between the beta version and what we currently have now, which is still, I mean, it's not ready for full prime time yet, but it's pretty far along, is the robustness and edge cases, right? So you can have something that's relatively easy. It works relatively well when it has a very strong Wi-Fi connection on good broadband, and when each party knows exactly what they're doing. It's a little more difficult when you have one bar of Wi-Fi connectivity, and you're literally trying to break it. Like we have another engineer in house who has basically turned his Mac into the world's worst Wi-Fi router. Like it basically it mimics a router, and it will randomly drop packets. It'll send double packets. It'll hold them. He's trying to make it feel like it's a really bad Wi-Fi environment, and we want Nucleus to work even in those horrible environments. Which is why actually we're building in a Wi-Fi repeater into each unit, specifically because if you go to Indianapolis and people have big homes and people don't know about their Wi-Fi necessarily, we want it to just work perfectly for the first time every time.
And then how about the manufacturing? What made, I mean, of course, there's a lot of appeal to working with Foxconn and the work they've done with Apple. What led you guys there?
So at first it was the name, right? Like knowing that so many other startups have promised the world and then either failed to deliver or have delivered very late. The fact that we could go with a reputable, trusted manufacturer. I mean, if they can build the iPhone, I have pretty good confidence they could build some Nucleus units.
We'll see.
Uh, we'll see. Yeah, I mean, we're cracking the whip, but I have some confidence there. So the name, we didn't want to be one of these startups who promises the world and then falls by the wayside. We wanted a quality product made on time. So it was initially the name, and then once we got, it was actually Morley knew someone who was there, and we got an introduction. And then as we started meeting the people there, we were so impressed. You kind of think of Foxconn as this conglomerate, 4% of Chinese GDP. I mean, I visited their headquarters well, not their headquarters, their major manufacturing plant in Shenzhen, and I mean it's the size of the city. I mean, it's literally a couple 100,000 people, in one location, and you can be overwhelmed by the scope and the size. But then you meet the people, and we had such a good personal connection. Many of them were parents. In fact, one of them who travels frequently between the U.S. and Taipei and Shenzhen and Canada, he mentioned that the condition for manufacturing and investing was that he's the first customer, right? Because he sees the need for his own family. And we consider them like we're good friends with them now. I had a call with them this morning. We're going to see them at CES, and we consider them friends and partners, and we're so thrilled with the humans behind the Foxconn facade. The people we're actually working with on a day-to-day basis are wonderful.
Did you meet with other manufacturers before them?
Yeah, so we met with a handful. I guess we put an RFQ to maybe it was about a dozen or so, narrowed that down to four. Then we met with those four manufacturers. Um, narrowed that list down to basically became between Foxconn and one other manufacturer who we were also impressed with. But then, as we met more with our counterparts there, and once they floated the idea of an investment as well, it became pretty clear that we wanted to work with Foxconn.
And I think it says so much that when you're talking to a leader at an organization of that size and he says, I'm going to be the first customer and use this for my family.
It was this great moment for us, like the fact that he so strongly feels the use case. It means he's not doing it just for business reasons. He's doing it because it's going to help his family, and it's also going to help, hopefully, millions of other families throughout the world.
Jonathan, when you look back on the last year and a half and those early days we were just talking about building the product, trying to break the product with bad Wi-Fi and getting to manufacture it, knowing what you know now, would you have done anything differently?
Yeah. So we probably would have saved a lot of time and effort and money. So when I first started, before I found Isaac and Morley, so I basically took all my life savings, put into the company, and tried to hire people to come build it. And at first, I tried going outside to find, basically try outsourcing the development. And that was a pretty bad idea for a couple of reasons. But if all you're doing is a quick app that doesn't require deep engineering, I would actually recommend that to most founders. Like, just get an MVP out there and test it, and if it's working and you get some traction, then you can build a whole team around it. It'll just be much quicker to get an experienced firm who's build it for you, in a month. But when you're doing something like what we're doing, which requires very, very deep engineering expertise, to outsource that core competency was the wrong decision. I would have rather have just waited until I found someone like Isaac, even if it meant waiting 6 months. Just having like someone that in-house is just critical. Then again, in order to entice Isaac on board and to have him leave his company, I did have some rough MVP, both hardware and software. Didn't work very well, but it was something. And with that MVP, I was able to raise a little bit of money. So it's a bit of a chicken and egg, right? The super talented person with 20 years experience isn't necessarily going to come join your startup unless you can prove that you've done something. So I'm happy that I did that, and that enabled me to get to a certain proof point. But other than that, it was pretty much a waste.
And then how about for your team? You guys were three. When did you bring on your first hire, aside from your co-founders?
So we actually, the Morley joined a little bit later. Like, we termed him a co-founders because he's been so critical in getting us from step 1 to step 10. He helped enormously along the way. We brought on hires relatively quickly, like a junior engineer to help out Isaac. Now we're up to 11 overall. Very heavy on engineering because that has to be a core competency. This just has to work. When we look between, let's say, engineering and marketing and sales, we could potentially sell this up the wazoo, but if it doesn't work, forget about it, right? We'll sell it the first time, we'll get all the returns, and we'll be bankrupt 6 months later. We'd much rather have a great product that works really well, maybe have slightly lower sales numbers than we would want, but if that's working really well, the referrals will come in, and we'll be able to then go and build on those sales numbers and have a great business based on a long-term business based on that.
How do you approach hiring engineers?
So I kind of not, I wouldn't say delegate, but I bring the engineers into the process a lot, right? I have a CS degree. I know basic computer science. I'm certainly not at the level that Isaac or some other engineers are. They're going to be working with this person day in, day out. Their livelihood is dependent on this person's success. So I bring Isaac and his team very much into the process and say, okay, what are we looking for? Do you know anyone that fits these needs? If not, where should we go look for them? I have them do all the first rounds of interviews because I just want them. They're the ones whose abilities to work well is going to depend on this new hire. So I want to make sure that they're the one that it clears their hurdles even before it clears my hurdle.
And then once they come and chat with you, a potential hire, what tips you off about someone? When do you get excited?
So their passion for the product, and so having a family is not a necessity, but understanding the fact that people want to hang out with their families, want to communicate with their families is, and that's true on both engineering and the marketing design side as well. It's someone that understands the product at a very visceral level, and not just someone that's looking for a job. Right, it has to be someone that would want to use this and would want to communicate with their family. And the nice thing about that is that it optimizes for people who are friendly, who are nice. We have a very strict no jerk rule, and it also enables us to kind of keep this family friendly environment. We because the Isaac, Morley, and I are all family men. We know what it means that if you have to stay in the office till midnight, what the burden that places on your family is. So often, most of the team will sign off from 6 to 8 at night, be with their families, tuck their kids into bed, and then we'll sign back in at 8 and work till however late we have to. Particularly with we have frequent calls with Foxconn, and they're 12 hours ahead, and so the time zones can get tricky. So people put in the work, but they structure it such that they're able to be with their families a lot. So looking for those criteria in hires just reinforces this whole ethos throughout the company.
And I think a culture like that says so much about you guys.
Thank you. I mean, we try to be we look at some of these negative examples of the bro culture, or the programmer culture, and we try to just find the opposite extreme. We have the most everyone on the team. People will get upset. If deadlines are missed and tasks are not done, people will get upset. But I've yet to hear a word spoken rashly. I've yet to hear someone raise their voice. It's a very rational type of anger. People are extremely respectful. People honor family time. Family time comes above almost anything else. If someone has a family emergency, it's obviously no questions asked. It's people take whatever time you need. So we and because we're selling to families, it's important. It's not just a perk that we can offer to potential employees. It's if we want to better understand our customers, this is what we have to live as well.
I think you said it best when you said it, that it's by families from families, by families for families.
Right, and it's really true. Even some of the features that we've come up with, voice activation, for example, was. I apologize for the imagery, but literally this is how I came up with the idea. Was I was elbows deep in a dirty diaper, and looking for we ran out of wipes. I was yelling at the top of my lungs for my wife, and she couldn't hear me. And I was thinking, how amazing! They'd already been working on Nucleus at the time, and I'm thinking, hey, if we just build in voice activation, it has a microphone up on the wall anyway. I could just say Nucleus, call my wife, and it'll reach her, anywhere in the house. And that's why we're building voice activation, because every single parent, is able to relate to that experience and to the need to just contact others. It's that exactly.
Totally understand that. Jonathan, you've shared before that you feel like your past positions and the hard logic that they've afforded you have been really helpful running a startup. Can you explain that a bit?
Sure. And I'm very impressed with your research. You certainly seem to have done a good bit of research. So I guess the 3 degrees that I hold are computer science, law, and rabbinic ordination, or Talmudic law, and they are all very, very highly structured, rigorous logic. And you take emotion out of it, and it's very, very rational. And the ability to think like that, and BCG actually is like that as well. You have to think through these logical puzzles and come up with different ways of looking at them. And the ability to think like that and take emotion out of the equation and just break any issue down into its component pieces, analyze them, put them back together, and come up with some creative solutions. That's basically what being a startup is, right? Coming up with creative solutions to difficult problems, and often getting emotional and just hurts that, right? There's no reason to scream or yell. Just figure out what's the issue. So how can we solve this issue? Okay, there are 3 different ways of solving the issue. Options 1 and 2 have these pros, these cons. Option number 3 seems to be the best because there's a different set of pros and cons. So let's go with option 3. So being able to just look at that very analytically and logically is certainly a big help.
Can you give us an example of when that's been helpful?
Sure. So probably the most emotional conversation you can have as a founder is around dividing equity, with other co-founders, and particularly it's interesting. That's where I respect my co-founders so tremendously and value them so tremendously. So it's important to be able to look at it and understand the emotions at play, but then remove your own emotion, right? And just understand like what factors are at play here, realizing that people correctly or incorrectly tie some of their worth to the company to the number on the cap table. Understand that has its own set of logic, and being able to make sure that you treat people fairly, honestly, and deal with them correctly. Make sure that they're happy and they feel satisfied. But to understand that there is emotion at play, but to view it very analytically and rigorously, and not let your own emotions kind of say, oh, I should do this or do that, but just look at it, across all the factors and make the correct decision.
Love it. And I want to shift gears just a bit to launching Nucleus. You had a couple of great tweets for aspiring founders of how to launch a product and the importance of having a PR firm.
Mm-hmm.
How was that instrumental in the launch and getting press?
So it was somewhere between extremely helpful and just necessary, right? Like, I mean, I would highly recommend it to any founder that wants to get press. You will be able to get some type of press without a PR firm if you bug enough reporters, if you send enough cold emails, you have an interesting enough story. Like, you will be able to get some press, but to get this surround sound effect and to get top level press. So we work with a company called Inner Circle Labs. We chose them for two reasons. One of which is it's mostly women, and they understood at a very visceral level that this is a family product, and they got it. Many of them have families, and they understood this at a gut level. And the second one is they were just awesome, right? They're just really great people. So we worked with them, and they got us into USA Today and TechCrunch and Engadget and a bunch of other great publications that we likely would not have been able to get into otherwise. And getting this surround sound effect so that on the day of launch, anywhere a person turns and they read TechCrunch, read Engadget, they get USA Today, and we're everywhere. You can only do with a high quality PR firm, and if you're not going high quality, it's not worth it, right? Like it doesn't make sense to save on a little bit of money and go for a medium quality, because if you just want to get one or two pieces of press, you could probably do that yourself, as long as your story is compelling and your product is compelling. If it isn't, even the best firm might not be able to get you much press anyway. So we are thrilled with our work with them. I mean, they're very professional, they're organized, and they have the connections, and we're just very happy with how that turned out.
And then you also said that when you went to speak with reporters, it's a lot like pitching.
Yes, and which is great. Like, I mean, if you don't believe in your product, then you probably
Bad
shouldn't.
system.
Exactly. Like, I mean, some people don't like talking to VCs or reporters. For me, it's great. Like, I believe in the product. I believe that we're going to be helping people. It's a chance. Skeptical reporters or skeptical VCs are the best, because you get a chance to face opposition and try to convince them that this is something that people are going to need. So yeah, I mean, it definitely is a pitch, and it's a sales pitch, but it's also something that if you believe in, you're doing the right thing. You're not lying. You're not shading the truth. You're not pulling the wool over their eyes. You're telling them why this thing that you're doing is awesome and they should be part of it. So, and that's true whether it's a VC or a reporter or a potential employee or partnership. I mean, I love that. I go into those rooms with my adrenaline flowing. Right? That's the best part of the day. Like, I love doing that.
What's some of the hardest questions you've received, whether it was early on or now, while pitching?
Good question. So for some reason, the very first time I got the, why is it different than Skype? I had to stumble a little bit through the answer. I mean, now, fortunately, I've got that, 1,000 times in the past. I think the hard questions are the ones that you haven't given much thought. And because we've been doing this for, I guess over a year and a half now, I've been fortunate that I've thought about a lot of different aspects and planned pretty far ahead. But then, so if someone asks me what's the product roadmap, okay, I can tell them what the product roadmap is. But then in one of the meetings with VCs, they have, okay, what's the product roadmap, and why do you value each one over and why exactly is that? Like, kind of draw like a two-axis thing, not just this is the chronological one, but this is why each one has the relative value in time. And with 30 seconds of thought, that's a pretty easy question to answer. But just being able to be put on the spot and answer things that you really have never thought of or have to look at it from a different angle. It's also why I love doing it, because it's fun to speak to super smart people who make you think of things that you've never thought of before. But that one does like throw you through a bit of a loop.
I think I would have been like, pass. I'll take the next one.
No, it's great. I mean, I love it. It's really, particularly like meeting with some of the top VCs. Like we're fortunate. Josh Koppelman.
That's how I learned about you guys. I saw a tweet from him.
Oh, okay, great. So Josh, he's the founding partner of First Round Capital. He's not invested through First Round. He's invested through a Philadelphia-focused fund called Startup PHL. So with him and Jeff Lewis, who is a partner of Founders Fund, also they've invested through their angel entity. But being able to meet with them, like two of the top VCs in the country who are super, super smart and able to look at things differently, and the fact that they've seen 100 different takes on a similar product, and they know when they're looking at you, they're coming with all that experience behind them, and being able to speak with them like that is great. So I love it. I mean, it's a great part of the job.
And a big part of that with any pitch is the big vision. So for you, Jonathan, when you're looking ahead, what's the big vision for Nucleus?
So the big vision is to become hardware independent and just be the glue that helps families communicate. We would love one day to have, whether it's Android Auto or CarPlay, the ability that when you're in your car and you want to talk to your spouse or your kids at home, and you talk to your car and you connect to your family at home, because it's like every single husband or wife, as they drive home on their commute, that's pretty much what they're doing, is they're telling their spouse, oh, I'm on the way home, right? So instead of having to pick up a phone and dial and call, and then have like just that the 30 seconds of like chit chat, or your spouse is making dinner or busy with the kids, the ability to just like say home, right, and then just talk instantly and effectively, and your spouse could be busy with the kids or making dinner, and just be able to receive that call and talk effortlessly. Like for me, a magical moment was a few weeks ago. We were loading the kids in the car and driving to my parents, and one of those like almost like from out of the movie. We had to go back in the house like 10 times. We forgot this and that. And we pulled out. We came back. We'd forgotten the kids' sippy cups. So my wife ran into the house. She left her phone in the car. Then as she was in the house, my 5-year-old in the back like had a paper cut and wanted a Band-Aid. So I was just about to turn the car off and go in the house to get a Band-Aid. And I realized that I have Nucleus, right? So I took out my phone. I opened the mobile app. I pressed kitchen. My wife was standing at the sink filling up sippy cups. She didn't have a phone on her. We don't have the landline. It would have been impossible to reach her. And I just said, honey, can you please bring Band-Aids? And she said, sure. Like, it was just like this magical moment of like, holy cow, like that's really going to help people. Like this exact use case, people are going to be using over and over and over again. So the ability to just have more situations like that, we're just helping families communicate, is going to be great.
I love it. Jonathan, before we go, we always like to focus on a couple of life questions that don't have to do with work. The first one, what's the best gift you've ever received?
Good question. I have to say, I mean, in the broader sense, I had looking at gift in the broader sense, I had a family member who unfortunately had breast cancer and then recovered from a pretty severe case. And that was a bunch of years ago. And the gift wasn't just the fact that she recovered, but it's the fact, like a new appreciation of family and relationships and the ability to value the day to day. And now at every family event where this person is there, and I think like, wow, like in an alternate universe, like we would not have all been together. It just helps me appreciate every day that much more.
I love that. This one's definitely less serious. If you had to play one song on repeat every day, what song would you play?
So unfortunately, that's happened.
Oh no.
What my 5-year-old, when he was, I guess, 2, So we used to live in Boston, and my in-laws were in Philadelphia, so we used to drive Boston to Philadelphia pretty frequently. And when he was 2, he was in love with this song called "One Day" by this Jewish group called the Maccabees. Actually, it's originally a Matisyahu song that they cover, and he would not sleep well in the car, and he would like demand that song, and he'd fall asleep, and we would be so terrified of ever changing it. We would literally drive for 5 hours, like back and forth with that on repeat. And whenever he was in the car, he needed that song, and we gave into it because it was that or screaming for a while. So I've lived that question, and I never want to hear that song ever again.
All right, last question for you, and I think I can probably predict the answer. What's your favorite part of every day?
So what's your prediction?
My prediction that it's getting to see the kids.
That's a great yes. And it's in the morning. I study Talmud every morning. I have a study partner who's in Penn Law here. Pretty early in the morning, I come back just as the kids are all waking up, and I walk in the door, and they all come running. It's great. They're all in their pajamas, like they're still blurry eyed, but like they come running, and yeah, that's a great call.
And I think that that's what you guys are doing with Nucleus, is saving all of those memories, whether it's when you're at work or if it's a family member who lives far away so they don't have to miss out on that. Jonathan, I can't thank you enough for sharing your work and your journey with us. How can everyone stay up to date with you and also learn more about Nucleus and getting it for their families?
So before that, thank you so much. This has been wonderful. It's been great getting to know you a little bit better. I mean, I guess it's an interview, but I would have loved to learn more about you. Sorry for monopolizing the conversation.
No, that's why you're here.
I understand, but even so, I still feel a bit bad. But thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. They can learn more by signing up for our email newsletter at our website, www.nucleuslife.com. They can follow us on Twitter, nucleus_life. We're pretty communicative. That's what we do. So I look forward to hearing more from you and from whoever else wants to follow us.
They're around, and you've got to watch the video.